rank and file CIA officials, the other intelligence organs within the US intelligence community are going to have access to all of these files. In other words, this information is going to be taken from a very secure location that was tightly controlled to one where it's shared. I mean, the Soviet Union, well, they would have known a lot of this stuff anyway. Maybe that wasn't really the thing that they were concerned about, but it was the other US institutions that they were really concerned about, because once the State Department, the rank and file CIA, NASA have access to these UFO files, the secret's going to be blown. You can't keep it. I mean, that was the thing. That was the real worry. The Soviet Union, I mean, they had their own secrecy system. They weren't really the concern here. Sharing classified UFO files with the Soviet Union, that wasn't a big deal. Never was. But sharing it with NASA and having that spill over to the other US bureaucracies, that was the threat. That was the thing that was really going to create chaos. There was a hotline conversation, and this is another Majestic 12 document. And it's allegedly a top-secret NSA intercept of a hotline conversation between President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev dated November 12, 1963. Kennedy and Khrushchev discussed the importance of their respective UFO workshop groups to deal with the UFO problem to avoid the risk of future conflict. Kennedy tells Khrushchev, quote, "I've begun an initiative without NASA to exchange information with your Academy of Sciences in which I hope will foster mutual concern over this problem and hopefully find some resolution." So that's confirmed, that's consistent with NSAM 271, which I mentioned is an official document. So that particular phrase is supported by the historical facts. Kennedy also said, "I have also instructed our CIA to provide me with full disclosure on the phantom aspects and classified programs which I can better assess the UFO situation." This is confirmed in that other that top secret memorandum to the CIA director. So that hotline conversation is consistent with some of the documents that I've mentioned, some of the historical documents and some of the Majestic documents. But the most important source of confirmation, I think, for the hotline conversation as authentic is that the statement that I made earlier that Sergei Khrushchev, Dr. Sergei Khrushchev, the son of Nikita Khrushchev, confirmed that on November 11, Khrushchev finally accepted Kennedy's offer. One day later, you have those memorandums. So don't you think there would have been a direct hotline conversation between Khrushchev and Kennedy? I think it's pretty consistent with historical documents and facts at the time that there would have been a hotline conversation between Kennedy and Khrushchev. I mean, how else would Kennedy have received confirmation from Khrushchev? I mean, yeah, sure, diplomatic communication and so forth, but that would have taken up time. I mean, if Khrushchev accepts on November 11 and Kennedy is releasing documents a day later, this couldn't have been just a matter of wire cables and so forth going back between the US embassy and the Russian embassy. There was a hotline conversation between them, and I think the NSA document, the NSA hotline conversation document, I think that's pretty consistent with the historical facts, and I think that helps me have confidence that it is an authentic document. So the authenticity is supported by NSAM 271, the memo to the CIA director, and Sergei Khrushchev's revelations later. Space cooperation, that's a misspelling, with the USSR would ensure that classified UFO files would be genuinely shared amongst US institutions. I think this was the thing Kennedy was really aiming for. It wasn't a matter of sharing classified UFO files with the Soviet Union. They knew what was going on. It was sharing these files with US institutions, as I mentioned. NASA, CIA rank and file, the State Department, all branches of the US military. These files needed to be shared, and that would have ensured presidential executive oversight. That was ultimately what Kennedy was driving at here. And that his national security team, the National Security Council, would assert a direct presidential executive control. Basically, he was doing an end run around MJ-12. Whatever system MJ-12 had set up, however they had worked with CIA counterintelligence to basically quarantine this level of information from the rest of the US political system and military institutions and the intelligence community, Kennedy was doing an end run around that. And this is what really, in the end, led to the confrontation. James Angleton and the MJ-12 Assassination Directive. On the bottom of Kennedy's memorandum to the CIA director of November 12, 1963, 10 days before the assassination, next to the signature on that November 12 document appears the following handwriting, quote, "Response from Colby," that's William Colby, who eventually became Director of Central Intelligence, but at the time was the head of Far East Asia, Vietnam and so forth, covert operations for the CIA. Response from Colby, "Angleton has MJ-12 directive." And that's dated the 20th of November 1963, 2 days before the Kennedy assassination. Colby is acknowledging that Angleton, 2 days before, had the MJ-12 directives and was using them to respond to Kennedy. This handwriting directly implicates Angleton in the Kennedy assassination due to the cryptic MJ-12 assassination directive. And there's an important statement by Timothy Cooper, and I think it's on the MJ-12 documents website, that basically says that when the burned document was released, and that Colby was basically identified, or that this burned document basically made it possible to trace the involvement of Angleton to MJ-12 directives and the Kennedy assassination. That with the release of that document, that shortly afterwards, William Colby died mysteriously, drowning in the Chesapeake Bay. And I think, and he was an expert swimmer, so I think we probably have the fingerprints there of an operation to get rid of Colby, given that Colby's handwriting was on this November 12 document, basically saying that Angleton had the MJ-12 directives. Colby knew about the MJ directives, so he was someone that could basically spill the beans and confirm whether the burned document was real or not. But of course, Colby is mysteriously drowns. So what does all this mean? I've got, what, 5 minutes? Okay, 5 minutes. The assassination directive, in my mind, represented a covert coup by MJ-12 that, through CIA counterintelligence, had the means to deny any presidential administration access to UFO files, and even forcefully remove any uncooperative federal official. I think what eventually happened was that because of the assassination directive being implemented and a president actually being killed under the direct orders of MJ-12 by CIA counterintelligence, that was under the control of Angleton at the time, I think MJ-12, the kind of being a purely American-controlled institution, I think the writing was on the wall for that organization. They basically knew that there had to be a drastic reorganization here. Whether out of shame, whether out of guilt, whatever it was, that I think those people on MJ-12 that authorized this basically accepted or acquiesced to MJ-12 becoming an international organization with greater corporate involvement and control over classified UFO files. Basically, American control was lost. And I think this is reflected in a number of statements, and this is probably the subject of another presentation, but there's an example there, Ben Rich's statement saying that in 1969, the control of classified UFO files was placed under the control of an international board of directors. So, conclusion, Eisenhower began the process of formal meetings and agreements involving nuclear diplomacy and extraterrestrial technologies. He regretted the loss of executive presidential authority over extraterrestrial affairs and the influence that had been ceded to MJ-12 and corporations. Eisenhower almost certainly warned Kennedy about MJ-12. Kennedy's attempt to regain executive presidential authority directly challenged the existence of MJ-12 and was the key factor in his assassination. What does all this mean? Well, basically, there is a lot of history behind US government policy on extraterrestrial life. I think that this history ranges over a number of areas: secret agreements, joint US ET bases, funding mechanisms for this vast apparatus of agreements and bases that, as I mentioned last night, can be as high as $1.7 trillion a year. Imagine trying to